Winning couples, I am so happy you are here. We have to dive right into this conversation because it is so important to me that I can help you and your spouse win in your marriage. And I even want you and your spouse to define, what does winning look like? What does it mean for us to have a healthy marriage that's mutually beneficial, that I feel loved, you feel loved, we both feel seen in the marriage? And so I want to dive right into this conversation on culture, the culture in your marriage. If this is your first time here, just know I have notes in front of me. It helps me to stay on track because I know you have a lot going on, and I want to make sure we get to the heartbeat of this conversation. So I want to start off right away to let you know every marriage has a culture. Your marriage has a culture. My marriage has a culture. Your best friend's marriage has a culture. And don't worry, I'm going to walk you through the 4 different categories of culture that I want you to pay attention to. But I really want to unpack this first. Culture is basically what's okay and what's not okay, what gets addressed and what quietly gets ignored. And here's the thing. All entities have a culture. When you have a human being involved, there is a culture to that experience. Your job, there's a culture of your job. If you attend church, do you attend church? I need you to attend church. That church has a culture. And this just happens to be my passion because I understand, and I'm going to get ahead of myself, but I understand when you're not intentionally shaping it, it is more than likely unhealthy. But a lot of couples are frustrated, not because they don't love each other, but because they have not named what they are actually building. They haven't taken time to slow down and name, what is it that we want to be the experience in our marriage. Now, I know that most couples are not waking up in the morning saying, whoo, what is our culture? Or you're not Googling, help me identify the culture of our marriage. But just because that's not what you're saying doesn't mean that that's not what's happening. And in these 20 plus years of being in the trenches with couples, I am seeing even more than before how important it is that we wrap our minds around this and understand it. So this is the example when I speak in corporate America, because remember, I told you every entity has a culture, and we normally understand this when it comes to companies. And so when I'm speaking in corporate settings, I often use the example of McDonald's and Chick-fil-A. Somebody call Chick-fil-A and tell them to sponsor this video. But when you go into McDonald's, there is a culture of McDonald's. There's something you expect, right? And you have a totally different expectation when you walk into Chick-fil-A. When you go to McDonald's and your child asks for ice cream, you are not surprised when they say the ice cream machine is broken, right? You already expect it. Why, when I said that, did you start laughing? Because you already know. But you know, when you are at Chick-fil-A, when you're getting ready to drive off, you know they're going to say, my pleasure. They're going to say, my pleasure at some point in your experience. And when they don't, you have a problem with it because you come to expect it. Why is it no matter where you are in Atlanta, in Texas, in California, do they have Chick-fil-A's in California? Wherever you are, you have an expectation of what's going to happen. Listen, if you are in Atlanta, you are not surprised if you go onto the news and you see that there was a fight at Waffle House. You're going to get mad if you don't see a fight at Waffle House because you come to expect it. You enter those establishments with a predetermined expectation, even if that expectation is unspoken. Marriage works the same way. And often your frustration isn't necessarily because you don't love each other. It's not because you don't have good intentions. It is really because of unspoken expectations. Just because you haven't spoken them doesn't mean that they're not there. And I want to take this even further because, again, I know you're not waking up in the morning saying, "Ooh, I wonder what our culture is." I know you're trying to figure out why we keep having the same argument over and over again. You're trying to figure out why can't we seem to communicate. You're trying to say, does he really get me? Does she really understand me? I am helping you address that by getting to the root of the issue. And a part of that is, yes, your culture. But before we can identify your culture, we got to deal with your values. We have to understand what really matters to your heart. Remember, culture is what is okay and what is not okay, what is allowed and what is not allowed. It happens in any entity where you have human beings. There's a culture at your job, there's a culture at your church, there's a culture that you grew up with, what is okay and what is not okay. Oh, I can help you understand it. If I come over to your house and I keep my shoes on, is that okay? If we were cool enough and I came upstairs, can I plop down on your bed in my outside clothes? Is that okay? Culture is what is okay and what is not okay. But watch this. Your culture is often, or it is informed by what you value. Again, not what I say I value, but what I really value. You've heard somebody say before, let me see your checking account and I'll know what you really value. Not what you say you value, but where you're putting your money, right? The Bible tells us that where your treasure is, there your heart is also. So your values, what really matters to you, what does it mean for you to be loved? What does love really look like to you? What are your is a value for you? Um, Time. You know, you've heard of love languages before. That really exposes your values, right? So what you value, what really matters to you, informs your culture. And so what happens is because you haven't slowed down to identify what you really value, you and your spouse have not created mutual values, and so you are building something that's not what the two of you want. You're building something that you saw from mom and them. Let me help you. All of us, you and I, if we're not careful, we're either simply repeating what we saw growing up or we're rejecting what we saw growing up. Instead of the two of us intentionally building what we want, not just a response of what we saw. I know, girl. I know, honey. I know I'm hitting you right where you are. I'm hitting my sisters right where they are. Fellas, I believe I'm hitting you right where you are. You are more than likely building what you saw or rejecting what you saw. And imagine this, your spouse is doing that. You're doing that. No wonder there's so much confusion because y'all haven't slowed down to identify. This is what I value. This is what you value. This is what we really want. Okay, because remember, I told you I'm going to tell you the four categories of culture that I want you to pay attention to. But again, we're either repeating or rejecting. And I did a whole video on values. And so I'll link that in the description. But the bottom line is when you haven't identified your values, you are not living them out loud. You're actually walking out what you inherited from your mom and them. And you got to decide if what they had is what you want. If it isn't, you got to rebuild. You got to tear it down and rebuild what it is you really want. Okay. So I want you to remember there is no such thing as standing still in marriage. We're either growing towards one another or we are drifting. And a lot of times you can find yourself drifting subtly. And that's why I'm saying, let's slow down, let's pay attention so we can put some things in place to protect our marriage from that drift. So here are four categories of culture that I want you to pay attention to. I would love for you and your spouse to watch this video and identify one of these four areas that you can say, you know what, we need to pay attention to that. So first is the conflict culture. In other words, some couples handle conflict with avoidance and some handle conflict with escalation, right? That could be the culture of your marriage. Either you just completely avoid conflict and you're just sweeping it under the rug and you're just hoping things get better, or you and your spouse escalate. You're dealing with it, but you're not dealing with it in a healthy way. And so you find yourself often escalating. And then what happens if one of you is the one who sweeps and the other of you is the one who confronts? Have the two of you sat down and said, this is how we want our marriage to deal with conflict. This is the conflict culture. We're going to have conflict, but this is how we want to be able to handle conflict. This is what helps me, honey. It helps me when you have an issue that you just bring it to me so that I don't have to guess, or I don't often feel comfortable bringing something to you because I'm concerned with how you're going to respond. Let's identify how we want to handle conflict in our marriage. Listen, how did you see conflict growing up? This is how I see conflict growing up. Sometimes when you approach things a certain way, you may not mean any harm, but your tone comes across in a way that's hard for me to receive it. Do you see what happens when you slow down and you identify this is how we want to handle conflict in our marriage? And when you don't do that, you have inherited what you saw. So conflict culture is one category I want you to pay attention to. Here's the second category: connection culture. What do I mean by that? Some couples are very intentional. We spend time together. We have date nights. We make sure we have this hobby that we do together. We are making sure that we go on vacation period. We are intentionally creating ways to connect. Other couples have not identified intentional ways to connect. And then they're wondering why the children, work, mom and them, I keep talking about mom and them. Mom and them gonna say, leave me alone. All of these things are pulling them apart because life is going to happen. But when you haven't created an intentional culture, this is what we do no matter how busy life is. Sometimes we want to go on a date night once a week. But in this season, we know things are very crazy, but we don't let it just happen by happenstance. We say, I know we're really busy, but we're going to at least do a date night in the house. You have to identify what is the culture we have created with how we connect. Or are you repeating what mama them did? Are you repeating what daddy them did? Daddy them didn't have time for that. And so they just let the marriage drift. Remember, I said you're either drawing closer together or you're pulling further apart. So I want you to identify what is the connection culture. We talked about conflict culture, and then we talked about connection culture. There's another culture. Woo, this one right here, I got to spend some time here. This is the boundary culture. In other words, who gets access to our marriage and who doesn't? Who gets my ear and who doesn't? Who am I giving access to what's going on in my heart and who doesn't? This is boundary culture. How do we handle emotional intimacy? How do we handle privacy? What is okay for me to talk about? What is not okay for me to talk about? Who is it that I get wisdom from? Who is it that I say, you know what, I can't get wisdom from that person? What are the boundaries you have in your marriage? What is the acceptable way that the two of us deal with the opposite sex? How do we deal with our parents and what we give them access to? How do we deal with the children, especially when you have adult children? How do we deal with that? What do we give them access to? Listen, I know some of us were raised with the mindset you don't tell anybody anything about your marriage. Well, how is that working for you? Because sometimes you need some wisdom, but you want to be very careful about who you're getting that wisdom from. I want you and your spouse to get clear about your boundary culture. What is okay? Who is it okay for us to communicate with? Listen, this is how your values get shaped, right? What does protection look like for me? What does it mean for you to protect me in the marriage? Woo, I told you I had to spend some time there. So I'll talk about conflict culture, connection culture, boundary culture. And I want to give you one more. And this is our home and family culture. And this is particularly important for those of you who are still raising children. What is the culture of our home? What do we want our children to experience? How do we want them to observe a husband and a wife interacting with one another? Do you want to create a culture where they never see you all disagree ever? As you can see, as I'm giving that, there's some concern with that. Or is it okay for them to see us disagree, but we don't want to we don't want to talk disrespectfully to one another in private or in front of them, because we want to model what it looks like to have healthy conflict? Do we want to make sure that our home is peaceful? That's a high value and culture for my husband and I. We want it to be a home that's peaceful. That doesn't mean that we don't have disagreements. It doesn't mean that we won't have moments of conflict, not at all. But we want overall there to be peace, there to be stability, for them to know that when they're in the home, that they don't have to worry about things being chaotic, right? Now, if my children were to hear me say not worry about things being chaotic, they would say, what house you talking about? But I'm talking about the chaos that is unhealthy. There's a lot of stuff, moving pieces in our family, but there is an undercurrent of stability. So you and your spouse want to talk about What is the culture? What do we want them to see? What do we want them to observe, not only with us, but what it means to be a family that loves God? It means to be a family that is guided by God. What does it mean for a husband to love a wife and for a wife to love her husband? What does it mean for parents to prioritize their children? Now, if you don't have children, that is okay. You may have a niece. You may even be what the family culture is with extended family. You want to be very careful that you are shaping what that culture is. So there's a reason good couples can miss each other. And it's often not because of love. It's not that I don't love you and you don't love me. It doesn't even mean that I don't want to be connected. It is often because we have different values. We have created different cultures within the same marriage. There's a book that I am going to write called Are the Two of You in the Same Marriage? When you have different values, it creates different cultures in the same marriage. That's how good couples keep missing each other. One spouse is assuming this is how marriage works, and the other spouse is not feeling safe or not feeling connected because you all are not building something together. So I am going to give you two things I want you to do, right? If this resonated with you, if you're like, Robin, I hear you, what do we do? Where I want you to start is I want you to start by getting clear on what do you want to experience in your marriage. These are your values. What do you want to experience? I want you to name your marriage values personally, and then I want you and your spouse to name them personally. Then I want y'all to come together and identify what are our values as a couple. And from there, what do we want to experience? So I'm going to post or I'm going to put the values video that I did right here on I Believe in Marriage in the description so that you can do that. Then you all can talk about those 4 categories of culture. And this is also why I keep pointing to the couples playbook. My husband did a video, and I'll post that in the description as well, when he said he talks about the couples playbook all the time. That's how you create a strategic plan for your marriage. The couples playbook is a resource that I created. And in the video, my husband said, I don't talk about it all the time just to keep pointing to a product. I point to it because I really believe it's a game changer. And the couples playbook will help you create the culture for your marriage. So all of that will be in the description. Your first step is to get clear about your values. Then you can begin to create the culture, and the couples playbook will help you do both of those things. You want to build a marriage that matters to both of you on purpose. All right, I hope that helps. Make sure you share this video, comment, and let me know what is your greatest takeaway. Until next time, remember, we are helping Christian couples win in their marriage.